clairvoyance and telepathy, vision and thought for action. Warm salutations from Sovereign Self. For the widespread development of the remote seership, or clairvoyant, and the telementation, or telepathic faculties, the human race stands in need. Not the cheap parlor trick variety. Not the sidewalk fortune-telling variety. Not a renaissance of spiritualist follies, but a genuine unfoldment of these latent faculties which await their call. And it is time to call for their unfoldment. Let's examine the affair. An all-out war wages for humanity's vital energy, its mind and its soul. A contemporary name for this state of affairs is war on consciousness, which I have previously also called consciousness hijacking. Probably a more fitting term, however, is the multiphasic hijacking of human being, MPHHB. Phases, that is, which range from the fruits of our daily labor to our perceptions of reality, and from the enforcement upon us of low conscious states to the recycling of our souls, and to the harvesting of the energies generated by those states and by that recycling. Let's say for a moment that the contemporary human species came into existence by some means of genetic tampering, and for the purpose of enslavement. If so, then the duration of human being hijacking parallels that of humanity itself. And if we correctly say it isn't so, there still stands nothing new with respect to this hijacking. Whichever is correct, the state of affairs steadily reaches the critical point beyond which the main of humanity may have no saving recourse. If this unfortunate hijacked human condition coincided with our creation, then now is the time for us to take remedying action, claiming and instantiating our true self-sovereignty, and taking still further steps. And if the condition came upon us at some point subsequent to our appearance on this planet, then now is the time to reclaim our prior sovereignty, and to take still further steps. Even if no hijacking per se is in fact the case, but rather is only apparently the case, such that the human condition, the given human condition, exists due solely to a natural tendency of the karmically entrapping, illusory effect of the physical, astral, and lower mental planes, such that we ignorantly keep ourselves enmeshed in the drudgeries of metaphysical materialism on earth, then again, the time to do something is now. For those forces that would take advantage of us, and would lead us into a far more abysmal future than that which has characterized our past, wage war to do it. Whether our state of affairs evolved it naturally or unnaturally, and whether or not we ourselves initiated it. Two facts remain unchanged. One, the state of affairs has come about. And two, the law of evolution urges us to pull ourselves out of it. And I cannot emphasize enough that the time to pull ourselves out of it, to avert it, to circumvent it, to overcome it, to rise above it, to set things on their proper course, is now. At this point, let's give a possible objection, its moment of glory. It runs as follows. Now, wait a minute. How are we to know what is the proper course of things? For all we know, this hijacking thing might be their proper course. What answer shall we give to that? We affirm that indeed we do not know the proper courses for all things, and that furthermore we do not need to know them. All that we need to know here is 1. That the universe is conscious substance in motion. It is alive. 2. The universe knows what it is doing. 3. The universe urges forward the evolvement of all life from within. 4. That therefore all life forms have a natural right to their constructive evolvement. 5. That any being, entity, or force that works contrary to another's universally rooted inner urge to evolve works against nature and must eventually pay the cost. 6. Therefore, if our own constructive evolvement is held at bay by some such being, entity, or force, we have a duty to avert that hold, to circumvent it, to overcome it, to rise above it, to set things on their proper course, and the universe knows it. Right now, each man and woman, down to the last, requires and deserves truth openly, in honest thought and consequent moral action, not only with respect to the fact of the hijacking matter itself, but also to the means of victory over it. We cannot wait for nature to take its slow course in working out the victory for us, or for some external benevolence to effect it for us. In other words, we can idly stand by, counting on some version of good always triumphs to manifest itself on our behalf. For whatever we might mean by that, it might not happen as we naively believe that it will. Many species come, and many species go, while waiting for latencies to manifest, for potentials to actualize. And if ours do not, let it not be due to us having ignored them, or having acted lazily with respect to them. While the road may not be easily traveled, the other one, the easier one, goes downhill. We have our share of universal will at our disposal to use wisely, and the universe naturally helps those who help themselves in accordance with its will toward constructive evolvement, to establish themselves as sovereign, shining constituents of the grand scheme. Flatly, waiting will not do, at least not for us, especially not in the face of forces that hijack us away from the upward trend of evolvement. Now let's attend to another possible objection, which has it that all roads lead to the same terminus, to the same place, whether that place is God, enlightenment, pure consciousness, unity, the cosmic final cause, home, or to some pie in the sky. Insofar as this objection tends to promote laziness of perception, thought, and action, it smacks of the previously mentioned good always triumphs. Metaphorically put, while it may be true that ultimately all roads lead to Rome, most of us are not anywhere near Rome, and may die while going the other way, or even while wandering in its general direction. The survival of our species, its constructive unfoldment, and each of our establishments of true individuality as sovereign selves, while we naturally have a divine right to them all, contrary to some popularly perpetrated beliefs, none of these results are natural birthrights of the race. We must wisely utilize our abilities to play well our roles in bringing about these results, before those abilities become too obscure for us to even recognize them, let alone to galvanize them into fruitful action. So, what shall we do? Ignorantly, or perhaps even contemptibly, bury our heads in the sand, with our other parts blindly exposed, appearing to solicit an unlubricated, unnecessary, and crippling existential experience? No. Sadly, I do not have all of the answers to every phase of the problem, the means to affect every level of victory over it. Probably no one person does. But I feel certain that central to victory is what I advocate repeatedly, and about which I have already provided significant practical instruction, that is, the recognition, realization, and manifestation of sovereign true selfhood. And coincident with that stands general, ethically oriented self-mastery, as well as increasingly accurate perception of the environment about which I speak. But here I propose in addition one of those aforementioned still further steps that, from my point of view, derives from the following two assertions. 1. In the superconscious regions of the mind lie the seeds and germs of future senses, latent, awaiting the call of unfoldment. And 2. The day is at hand when the repugnancy of the secrecy over our hijacked state of affairs shall be trumpeted, and the day when the doom of ignorance over our ways to victory over it shall be sounded. The day will come when the senses of seership and telementation shall render said secrecy and ignorance impossible. These 2 senses are my addition here, and stand as our current points of address, for the reason that I just now gave. Remote seership and telementation popularly belong to the category known as psychic phenomena. Some common terms denoting them are telepathy, thought transference, astral sensing, clairvoyance, remote viewing, and psychometry. As demonstrated, with respect to the general thought transference side of these, I prefer to use William Walker Atkinson's term, telementation. In my presentations prior to this one, as well as in my prior orations of others' writings, I have declined to discourse pragmatically about the development of these mental faculties. Where I have spoken of them, I have done so only in reference to the general category, and merely to state my reasons for declining to speak further about it. For in considering the many layered tricks of the false ego, the current stage of humanity's ethical awareness, which is minimal, and considering the ever-present principle of cause and effect, my efforts have always progressed in the direction of the safe and assured constructive development of each man, woman, and child. And with the gravity of these factors weighing upon my conscience, the specific reasons for my aforementioned discourse decline have largely had to do with at least 2 phases of what I call spiritual materialism, a fitting term which I attribute to Chogyam Trungpa in his Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. Here I apply his term. I apply his term to certain of the potential hazards awaiting the man or woman who practices the development of these psychic faculties which form our current subject matter. One of them is the mistaking of these faculties' development for spiritual development. The other one is cousin to the first. It is the strong tendency for such faculty development to actually lead the man or woman away from spiritual development by bolstering the false ego. This bolstering may occur directly, in rather obvious ways, such as that resulting from a feeling of secret power over the minds and the doings of others. As well, it may occur a bit less directly. One such way brings us back to the confusing of psychic development for spiritual development. In this case, however, the belief that the development of the psychic faculties necessarily indicates some sort of spiritual advancement or indicates some fashion of true selfhood or egohood attainment condenses into the false ego and thereby further crystallizes its structure. Now, these hazards are quite real. In fact, only with honest and persistent vigilance can they be avoided. And if we desire to play well our roles in the constructive advancement of ourselves, our race, and of all life, they must be avoided. Equally real exists another category of associated hazard, and reason for my aforementioned decline to say much about the development of the psychic faculties. It involves their immoral applications. Such applications constitute a form of black magic, which always harshly lashes back upon its doer sooner or later. For every act circles back to its origin, and due to the law of attraction, it furthermore brings along all of its metaphorical friends that it picked up on the way. And insofar as intentional black magic by its nature contravenes the principle of ethical action inherent in the law of evolution, it brings back some karmic friends that can be on the rather nasty side. So hazard, yes, but maybe even more appropriately put, outright danger. Dangerous, too, is still another category, that involving the tendency for some psychic applications to get their practitioner involved in astral or mental plane pitfalls originating, at least apparently, outside of himself. Predatory and parasitic entities and forces lie in waiting for the unwary, the ignorant, and the foolish. The least of their effects can, for example, involve the tricking of the practitioner's perception with respect to his intended results. Such things occur with many a sidewalk fortune teller and with many a medium's circle. and maybe the greatest of their effects can involve undesirable entity attachments, the still further hijacking of the practitioner's vital energies, and the reorientation of his cosmic sojourn. Let us for the moment call all of these above stated categories of hazards and dangers trips and traps. Called these, it will do us well to bear in mind that the influences and the energies that seek to trip us and to trap us into our own devolvement, one way or another, lurk just around the corner. Let us also keep in mind that common among their effects is perception deception, which masks their other effects, or even creates the illusion that the opposites of those effects are the actual case. Do not underestimate perception deception. Most of humanity lives in a brutal state of it. And let's also maintain awareness that any one trip can land us in a trap, which in turn can easily land us in another one more concealed and consequential than the first, and so on, each compounding the general situation. All of these have been my reasons for not previously saying much about the development of the so-called psychic faculties, and they are good reasons. But the time has come for me to reverse my trend. Despite the potential trips and the traps along the way, the general unfoldment of remote viewing and telementation would significantly put us all on level ground with one another, and would serve well to trumpet the earlier stated repugnancy of secrecy, sound the stated doom of ignorance, and render said secrecy and ignorance impossible. Therefore, when applying to my intended trend reversal the following two test questions for its rightness: 1. What I will for each and every, that is, human being, if having circumstances identical to my own, to proceed along these same lines as I. And 2. Do I will for every human being to develop these faculties on the grounds that I have proposed? My answers to both are yes. I now feel it my duty to publicly present practical instruction in seership and telementation, and in relevant material that I believe will augment safety and progress with them. So I commit to providing these, forthcoming. But for the time being, I urge you to put into practice the instruction given to you in William Walker Atkinson's Arcane series, 4-book series, which you will find among my already orated presentations. Place special attention upon the establishment of egohood or selfhood, and your relationship with the absolute, and upon developing your conscious control of vril, or vital magnetism. Additionally, implement into your daily life the material in my recent presentation entitled Attention, the General Fact, Rule, Technique, and Solution. While the instruction in these treatises is simple, its application may present some difficulty. So affirm to yourself, I can, I will, and I will do it now. And then commence with the doing. For these are wise and logical starting points, although you in fact might not find them pointed to elsewhere in connection with the specific matter at hand. I strongly suggest that you commence with these logical starting points for many reasons. Among them is a difficulty that might arise further along, in actually unfolding your latent mental faculties that stand as our current points of address. Not only is it the case that they in large are latent, but also it may well be the case that our race has buried them into latency at some point in the past. If so, we must pay the laborious price to retread old ground in resurrecting them. Furthermore, I believe that much effort has gone into intentionally disabling us with respect to them. For example, our pineal glands play significant roles in true clairvoyance and telepathy, but the functions of our pineal glands have atrophied from lack of use, and moreover have atrophied from chemical and other attacks upon the organs themselves. If such are our starting points in my herein proposed endeavor, And if our respective goal is the rather full-blown manifestation of it due to a current near necessity, then we do not face an easy task here. But necessity is the mother of invention, and we stand in good fortune to possess within us the power to create. So let's do our best to overcome the apparent obstacles, learning to perceive them as pointers toward the correct directions, and putting first things first. Now, at times I have said that I do not personally care much about the human race, but that I rather write and give my oral presentations on its behalf merely out of a sense of duty to universal will. I have also indicated that my faith in humanity to take the reins of its own sovereignty and evolvement is bleak at best, insinuating that I stand with Mark Twain when in his later years he wrote "The Damned Human Race." I ask that you do all that you can do to differ from me in my apparently pessimistic attitude toward humanity, striving to persevere in contrasting optimism, but while also increasing your perceptual accuracy with respect to the human condition and the general environment to which that condition relates. And I ask that you side with me in performing out of a sense of duty. For ultimately, it is acting from that sense alone that can instrument your rise above the cyclical sway of whatever material karmic effects that you set into motion, whatever they are. Fundamental to all of your other motives, do right acts because it is your duty to do them, letting the results entirely up to the universe. Accordingly, strive to develop remote seership and telementation fundamentally due to this sense of duty. The universe will put its wind to your back if you dutifully desire, will, and act in accordance with its direction toward the evolvement of all life. And remember, the universe is conscious substance in motion. All the universe is alive. Your true self is a center of its experience and a focal point of its energy control. You are an essential component of its self. Your very use of language is a part of the universe's own evolving dialogue, from one point of its view to another, about the infinite details of the universe's own moment-to-moment creation, duration, and destruction. And importantly here, your development of seership and telementation towards the ends previously given, yet done fundamentally out of a sense of duty in and of itself, will sensibly orchestrate constructive developments in point of view and dialogue within the great ocean of universal mind power. As I have said elsewhere, do not sell yourself short. I will recount for you my limited experience with voluntary or intentional telementation. I vaguely remember that as a toddler I did not quite understand why I had to speak aloud for my desires to be known by others. I felt that all I should have to do was to think about them in some certain way. But to try as I did, it did not seem to take effect. So I largely resorted to crying. The talking that I heard amounted to an odd thing from my viewpoint, something that others appeared to deem necessary, and apparently that I would have to task myself with learning if I wanted to get anything done, or if I wanted it to be like the others. For this talking thing kept happening around me, and sometimes directed at me. So I learned to do it. Well, and then there was no shutting me up. My next great challenge involved coming to terms with the idea that if I wanted to move some object, I had to actually make physical contact with it and apply relevant force. It, however, seemed clear to me that all I should have to do was to think about it in some certain way. But how I got talked, of all things, out of my clarity over that is another story. As my childhood progressed, a series of paranormal experiences involved me. Some of them psyche-shattering, terrifying, consequential to my course in life. They set me on a course of investigation into their natures and sources. But at first all that I could initiate were inquiries aimed at the adults around me. They, however, provided me with no resolve. Eventually, as a teenager, I found some remotely associated books. Among them were a few relating to telepathy. One such book is called Thoughts Through Space, which, as I recall, has to do with Russian experiments and the locating of some lost people. The book was not an instructional one primarily. Instead, was more documentary. Yet, when blended with some of my own intuition over thought transference, its contents gave me enough information to put into practical use. My thought upon reading those contents? Here it is. I knew it. I knew it since the day I was born, and there I went and learned it to talk like the rest. What a world. Who did this to it? Initially, I would sit in the dining room during quiet periods in our house, away from distractions, and I would relax with my eyes closed. I had not yet acquired major life concerns, and therefore had acquired a little cumulative stress, so relaxing took no special effort, and physically and mentally letting go, alongside some rhythmic deep breathing for a few moments. Then I would effect the focusing of my mind on no immediate content, including no mental images, just still darkness. When content with that step, I would then put as much mental effort as I could into the thought, name, and mental picture of the person with whom I desired to form a mental communication link, and with the conscious intention to do so, as though it were the only thing that I had to do in the world at that moment. While doing this, I carefully cast aside any doubts that might occur over my imminent success with this by simply maintaining my focused action in the intended direction. Soon enough, I would sense that the link had got established. Now, how that sense felt is difficult to describe, but once experienced, it is easily detected. For me, it involved the indubitable perception that the targeted person had answered my call, so to speak, as in mentally responding, "I'm right here." Another way to describe the feeling is that it involved a sense of established rapport, such that whereas just previously there had only been my focus upon the person, now that focus had succeeded in its having invited the appropriate channel to open. The perception of this, however it may be described, provided a feeling of released pressure, for the mental energy so previously focused now had its target location potentially into which it could flow. At that moment, I would detect a tendency to relax my effort, but instead of such relaxing, which in my opinion might soon have brought upon the loss of the established link or rapport, I would then instead immediately shift the entire content of my focus to transmitting my intended message. The message would always be a simple one, such as hello, or I am thinking about you, or I will call you on the phone, or call me on the phone. Transmitting the message amounted to an insistent, continuous pouring of the thought in mentally verbal form through the front of my forehead and into the other person's mind, similarly to telling it to him in person. I would also visualize the message beaming directly to and into the intended person. In fact, at no point did I consider the physical distance between the receiver and I. That made no difference. But if I knew the probable physical location of the person at the time, I would beam my message in that general direction, although I did not feel that doing so was an important part of the procedure. I understood that the established communication link was a mental one. Selecting a most likely geographical direction just added to my confidence. I would, again, dismiss any intruding thoughts or doubts using the same general method as before. That is, by just maintaining as much singular focus as I could, but now, of course, on the sending of the message. I also applied to that focus as much transmitting power as I could, from the start of the transmission to its finish. This combination involved willed, calm, confident, mental intensity. And soon enough, I would sense that it paid off, for a feeling would arise once again that I had succeeded. This time, however, it was in the form of confirmation that the message had hit its mark, as though the person had said to me, "I got it." Then I would send a nice thank you, goodbye, trust the overall result, disengage, and direct my attention to other things. The procedure boiled it down to clearing my mind so that its full capacities for focus and power could come to bear, and then applying those capacities accordingly, like going from normal, multi-focused, low-power activity to no activity to full-blown, singularly focused, maximum power activity in a mood of calm confidence and with intent. Invariably, so far as I could determine, these doings proved to have worked as I had intended. For example, if my message had been a simple, "Hello, I'm thinking of you," then when I would see the person, most likely the next day at school, he would voluntarily report to me that last evening he'd had the distinct notion that I was thinking about him, and he would ask me whether I knew what might have brought that on. Or I would ask him if he'd had such an awareness lately, and upon considering my question for a moment, he would give me the corresponding report, also stating the approximate time of the event correctly. If my message instead had been, "I'm going to call you on the phone," and then I would follow up with the call, he would say something to the effect of, "Whoa, this is weird. For some reason I expected that you were going to call just now." As this activity progressed, one of my friends became an interested, usual target for my experiments. A few times upon my doing this, he'd call me on the phone and say, "You just now were doing that, right? I know you were." Eventually, I got to walking the several miles to his house and standing outside of his bedroom window and mentally telling him to open his curtains and look at me. As I recall, it worked every time, and I'd motion for him to sneak out so that we could roam the neighborhood together looking for whatever mischief we could get ourselves into. Of course, on each such occasion, he would tell me that he knew that I was standing out there telepathizing him, as he put it. Interestingly, however, when any of my friends and I tried any of the telepathic experiments that I later came to know commonly commence under the name of scientific research, such as looking at pieces of paper with numbers written on them and then trying to transmit the numbers to a receiver's mind, our results worked no better than those indicated by mathematical probability. I do not know why. Perhaps some such nominal results had to do with the forced circumstances, or with the triteness of the objectives, or maybe even with their silliness. Another thing is that I had been much better at transmitting than I was at receiving. We each have our relevant, predominant aptitudes. And it may stand in your interests that I eventually denounced and discontinued my practice. My respective denouncement followed an especially productive event. A friend had asked me to mentally cause a girl who he liked, but toward whom he had felt shy, and who had never so much as looked in his direction, to approach him with romantic desire. So I did it, and it must have worked, for the very next day she did it. She walked straight up to him and announced that last evening she had decided that he is cute, and she suggested that they, so to speak, go together. Well then, because of that event, word spread that I could make things happen. Similar requests soon poured in from various sides, and as I recall, not all of them were as apparently harmless as the original one. It did not take me long to determine that my ability involved an unfair advantage over others. That's the way I saw it. At the same time, I recognized within me the potential temptation to use it like that anyway. So I discontinued it altogether. Now I wish I had overall decided otherwise, minus any temptation toward unscrupulousness. So be it. The conscious ability does not now come to me nearly as easily as it once had. In closing here, the following analogy to the above stated telementative procedure may instrument your understanding of the general idea behind it. My sitting down with the intention to telementally transmit a message was like walking to the phone and picking it up to make a call. My clearing of mind was like waiting for a dial tone. My mental focus upon the target individual was like dialing the number. My persisting, intense focus on the person was like the ringing of the other person's phone. My sense of having established the intended mental communication channel was like the person having answered the phone. My focus on transmitting the intended message was like me stating the reason for my call on the phone. My sense of message receipt confirmation was like the person on the other end of the call replying, "I understand." My goodbye was like the usual, "Okay then, talk to you later." And my disengaging and directing my attention elsewhere was like hanging up the phone and moving on to the next thing in the day. It was as natural and as simple as that. And for me, it got around to that whole talking thing, the necessity of which I still had not quite grasped, but which as a youth I had participated in maybe a bit too much, or unwisely, for my own good. And some days I still wander about that latter part, but now with respect to my present life. Yet I maintain hope that in attempting to carry out my current sense of duty, here in my writings and presentations, I say something that serves you well. And I feel confident that if by such discourse my intended meanings accurately transmit to your perception, some telementative undercurrent helped to make it so. Subscribe, share, love, live well. Copyright by the creator and orator of Sovereign Self, me, 2017. All rights reserved, except that you may share while citing this source, as you will, unless for profit.